I'm a digital junkie at the best of times.
I'm occasionally guilty of taking my phone into the washroom, but only occasionally. Oops, left my earphones.
But in the middle of a global pandemic, thank goodness for the internet. You know what I mean. Binge watching your favorite shows.
Or downloading useless screensaver apps like this because I can't travel.
Sharing everything on social media. And checking in on the family.
Hi, Mom. How are you doing? How is Dad?
I'm doing well. Dad's well too.
How are the dogs doing? Hi, Vanilla. Hi, Cookie.
And then there's work that still has to be done.
The internet is how I make a living. It's my bread and butter. My company provides social media insights and data analytics solutions for brands. It's meant hours and hours here, on the internet, on Zoom or on Skype, keeping in touch with my team. So how much time has everybody been spending online since COVID started?
Pre-COVID, 8 to 10 hours online, but I noticed now in COVID, it's about 12 to 16.
12 to 14 hours?
13 to 14 hours.
I'm at least on 14 hours, including my Netflix and my other stuff I'm doing online.
In the early months of the pandemic, internet demand surged as much as 70%. But our love affair with our gadgets has been growing for a while, long before COVID-19. And when it comes to data, we've gone from talking about megabytes and gigabytes to talking about terabytes, petabytes, and exabytes.
Our data use is exploding so much, it feels like we keep building on the word byte. If you're wondering what comes after exabyte, it's zettabyte, and then yottabyte. Some people in the IT industry joke that we might run out of words soon, but you get the idea. It's huge, huge amounts of data.
We're riding on the internet, cyberspace, set free. Hello, virtual reality.
We've certainly come a long way from when being online looked like this.
You're going surfing on the internet.
There's some pictures of me as a teenager. I still remember when we first got the internet at home. It was a huge deal. The phone line was connected to the internet line, and my mom would always keep tabs on the bills because it was expensive. But look at us now. So many of us have more than one device, and we live in the time of unlimited data.
The world of unlimited data, of endless anything and everything. But what if I told you that behind this virtual world lies this?
We're often told about the impact that the internet has on our lives in terms of how we need a digital detox, or warned about online fraud, or creepy stalkers. But seldom do we talk about the fact that the internet is a massive contributor to the world's greenhouse gases.
Every minute, the world sends hundreds of millions of emails. That creates a carbon footprint similar to 500 flights from Singapore to Auckland, New Zealand. Every minute, millions of Google searches are made. That creates a carbon footprint similar to producing almost 4,000 plastic bags. So how bad a polluter is the internet really? I decided to meet up with ecologist Sean Lum, a winner of the 2017 President's Award for the Environment.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, Prerna.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I've never met anybody who's had a President's Award before.
Okay.
So I was wondering if we could take a quick selfie.
Would love to. You know, we leave a little carbon footprint, but...
I won't put it up on Instagram, I promise.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, like, how big of a polluter is the internet really?
All of those IT-related services That's the equivalent of the aviation industry. That's 2% of global carbon emissions. The 2% estimate is on the conservative side, so we may already well be exceeding that 2%.
So Sean, you're saying all these months planes were grounded during COVID. We were still polluting by watching Insta stories, Netflix, and so much more just by staying home and not traveling.
Absolutely. It's much bigger than most people realize. I mean, it really does seem a very guilt-free way of getting information because there's nothing physical. It's silent, it's quiet, it's formless, it's scentless. But yet, it's still contributing to global carbon emissions. It's frightening. I mean, even for me, I use the internet also, right? And we all do.
Yeah.
But I think in the same way, if you are aware that driving a car, riding a plane are not good for the environment, I'm hoping we kind of reach this tipping point where we all realize, okay, me online equals carbon emissions equals climate change, so we need to look for solutions that we can all still enjoy the conveniences and the miracles, really, of modern technology. I mean, you're in the industry, but at the same time, moderating that impact or maybe even turning it around.
Being part of the tech industry, I've known about the net's carbon footprint, but it's not something you really think about. Unlike planes, cars, or factories, it's hard to imagine the internet as a polluter when you don't see the pollution.
To understand why the internet pollutes, we first got to understand the internet. And to do that, we've got to start near the sea, or more precisely, under the sea. So Gerald, what's the connection between the internet and the sea?
Well, the internet is basically connected by the sea through submarine cables. Today, there are over 400 submarine cables that's linking the world across the globe.
I'm trying to picture this. There's these huge ships that actually lay these cables under the sea, or how does it work?
Yes, via a cable-laying vessel. And on the cable-laying vessel, there's specialized cable-laying equipment that carries kilometers of submarine fiber optic cable. We carefully lay them down. Our company have recently laid the cable between Singapore and Malaysia.
So it's fascinating to think that the emails that I replied to this morning may have come from your cables. So Gerald, what do these cables look like? I can see you've brought some.
Yes, Prina, let me show you.
Okay.
This is a standard submarine fiber optic cable. And as you could see here, there are multiple strands of fiber. So this is actually transmitting the data. The cable is protected by armoring, and this armoring layers actually protect the cable against impacts. But let me show you this, Prina.
Okay, that looks huge. Can I hold it for a minute?
Sure.
Whoa, okay, that's heavy. That's like a 3-kilo dumbbell.
No, that's a very expensive dumbbell you're holding.
I'm sure it is.
This is a composite hybrid submarine cable, and it transmits not only data, but high voltage electricity. We are able to serve two functions in one, and we'll see this as a growing trend going forwards.
Undersea cables, like these, crisscross the world, spanning a length of over 1 million kilometers, creating a global superhighway.
But a superhighway needs a sort of command center. So if I was to take a picture of this map and email it to a friend of mine in London, it would break up into tiny little fragments and be processed by data centers along the way at lightning speed.
And there lies the problem. Making all that happen inside those data centers needs power. Lots and lots of power. Remember that? The 2017 hit continues to be one of YouTube's most viewed videos. But 7 billion plays of Despacito is said to have consumed as much electricity as 5 African countries combined.
Simple question for Greenpeace. Why should the world be concerned about energy consumption?
The energy system today accounts for half of the carbon emission globally. It's because we rely so much on fossil fuels generating carbon emission that's heating up our Earth.
There's no denying that we need data centers But how much of a problem are they in this cycle of power consumption?
They are definitely a significant reason why the internet is using so much power, because we have about 500 hyperscale data centers in the world, which are large warehouses where tens of thousands of server racks are in there. And if we're including the smaller ones, we could be talking about millions. In the face of climate crisis, we need to address their carbon emission and energy footprint.
Inside the hidden world of data centers that store a bit of you, me, and everyone. What makes them so power hungry?
Hey Siri, what's the weather like today in Singapore?
It's currently partly cloudy and 26 degrees in Singapore.
That answer came in barely a second. And it's because of places like this. The cloud.
Yes, this is the cloud, and it's not floating around in the ether. Basically, it's rooms full of computers like this. Or a fancier word for that, data centers.
Data centers, where our emails and Twitter accounts and Insta stories and everything else is stored and processed before landing up on our devices.
You know, it always amazes me to think that somewhere in here could be a Facebook picture of me from college or my favorite Netflix show. It's kind of cool. And speaking of cool, I knew it would be cold today, so I brought my jacket because data centers are always cold.
And there's good reason for that. These computers or servers that store all the data emit loads of heat.
So imagine your laptop sometimes, or your phone. It gets warm when you're using it. Now imagine tens of thousands of servers in a place like this. It gets really, really hot.
Hidden below the floor and the walls of a data center is a matrix of pipes.
That's one of the rooms under construction, something you don't ordinarily get to see. And these are the large pipes that are part of the massive cooling system.
Problem is, all this cooling needs energy, adding to the world's carbon footprint.
So this is the control room of the data center.
Yeah, this is the operations center that we use to monitor and manage the entire facility.
So Chris, how much power does it take to keep this data center running?
This is a 12 megawatt facility. This is the equivalent of about 50,000 households over the course of a 12-month period. And as an example, our Shanghai facility is quite a bit larger, equivalent of 120,000 Singaporean households over the course of a year. There are data center facilities around the world that are double that, maybe triple that size. Typically, about half of that power, if not more, depending on the actual design of the facility, will be focused on the cooling aspects. And so the heat builds up and has to be taken out in order to make the system work correctly. Well, you know, if the internet went down, you wouldn't be very happy about that, would you?
I completely agree, and I can certainly echo the sentiment, even with my own clients, Chris.
Nobody accepts failures in a mission-critical environment, and that's what data centers are. They're mission-critical.
So half of that energy is used for cooling systems. What can you guys do to bring that down?
We use things like the control room and the tools that you see in here. It allows us to predictively fine-tune our air conditioning systems in reaction to what's happening in the outside environment.
So Chris, if it's raining outside, we could effectively save energy, right?
Right. If you raise the temperature, then you've got less demands upon the air conditioning systems, which then reduces the amount of electricity that they need to use.
If the cloud were its own country, it would rank 6th in energy consumption.
With so much of the world's power coming from fossil fuels, tech companies across the globe are under pressure to go green.
And one of those solutions can be found right there. High atop the city's housing estates is where you can find green solutions like solar power to fight environmental damage. Who would have thought that my next Microsoft Teams client meeting or that my next Facebook post could be made greener by solar power?
Solar power from buildings like these can be sold to data centers here in Singapore.
So, Richard, this solar power deal is Microsoft's first and largest renewable energy deal in Asia.
Absolutely. It is on our goal to power all our data centers and operations with 100% renewable energy. In 2018, when we signed this deal with Sunseap Energy, the solar power company, this energy that is generated powers the common areas in the HDB flats, like the lights, the lifts, and the access that is generated goes back into the grid and also helps to power our operations as well.
Microsoft has been looking at some rather crazy ideas, and recently you removed this data center from under the water. What did you guys find?
Well, one of the challenges around data centers is cooling. So 2 years ago, we sunk a data center into the ocean off the coast of Scotland. Down in the ocean itself, it's a lot cooler than if you have to, let's say, for example, manufacture a lot of cooling system to power a data center that's above ground. It's fascinating, the discoveries that we made. When we run it lights out, there is no need for any humans to actually do the maintenance. This can be done remotely. So this leads to a much more energy efficient data center. It was funny, we put several webcams around the data center itself and the fishers actually liked it.
So while the servers were enjoying the cool under the ocean, the fish were enjoying the heat that was emitting from the data center.
I think that was a really kind of an interesting side fact.
Global giant Microsoft is not the only one looking to the ocean. Singapore's Keppel Data Centres is also thinking of harnessing the benefits of the sea with floating data centers.
So, Wai Ming, here's my version of the floating Keppel data center. What do you think?
I really wish it's so simple to produce.
Okay, so you mean it doesn't have all these cool things like these sails and like what a floating boat would look like, no?
You will not look anything close to a boat. Imagine a huge mega pontoon structure. We will fabricate all the data center modules in a shipyard, attach it to the pontoon, and having it in the sea allows you to have mobility. Tow in, tow out, redeploy them as you require.
Right. And then for cooling purposes also, that would be great because it's cooler on the sea already.
Yes, it does. And because we are using seawater for cooling at the sea itself, it delivers 80% more cooling efficiency versus a conventional data center.
But on the larger scale of things, how do you really save on energy?
Yes, the real trick and the crux is really using LNG for power generation. In Singapore, more than 90% of our power is generated via liquefied natural gas. They are being shipped into Singapore via ships and vessels. And basically, to generate power, you have to turn it back to gas. The whole process is called regasification. And in that process itself, we generate lots of cool energy. We capture the cool energy and we use that to cool the data centers.
Okay, so that sounds really great because you're actually killing two birds with one stone. You're using the energy to power the data center as well as cool the data center at the same time.
Yes, you're very correct.
Okay, Wai Ming, I'm going to give you one of these as a souvenir to take with you and can't wait to come and visit the floating data center.
Sure, Prerna, such good effort. I will keep the souvenir, and in a few years' time when we launch the floating data center park, you are most welcome to visit us.
Climate change is real. It's heartening to see companies being so innovative in their efforts to mitigate the carbon footprint from all our data use. Take Google's ambitious plans for its data centers.
We intend to become the first major company to operate carbon-free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
And Google's big new idea, every hour of the day, follow the wind where it's windy and the sun where it's sunny.
Energy is tricky. Once you generate the electricity, if you don't consume it or store it, it just disappears, it gets lost. The wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, so there are hours in the day where there are no renewable energy resources. you rely on carbon-intensive energy generation because you still need to power your operations during those hours. When you look at every hour of the day, there's still 40% of the hours of the day globally where we are relying on carbon-intensive electricity resources. So we're taking this challenge on. One of the sustainability-related breakthroughs that we have recently done is what we're calling carbon-intelligent compute. If the sun is shining in Singapore and there's plenty of sun power, we could schedule all of those non-critical jobs in Singapore. But what happens when it suddenly starts pouring with rain in Singapore? Then we can quickly shift those jobs to happen in the Taiwan data center if at that time of the day is super windy and there's plenty of wind energy in the grid. Our data center engineers have realized that there are a number of jobs that are not time sensitive. When you're doing a Google search, you want your answer right away. There are other jobs, however, that normal users don't even realize that they happen, like some optimization algorithms on YouTube videos or some Google photo filters that might not be critical for the user to see right away. Those jobs can happen at any time during the day.
Then there's Facebook, which owns WhatsApp, Instagram, and Oculus. Facebook is building its first data center in Asia, here in Singapore. It's set to be one of its greenest yet.
So, Orvi, how big is this data center in Singapore going to be?
11 stories tall. This is going to be our first multi-story data center that we've ever built. We've taken a design that really could accommodate something on the order of 20 football fields worth of data center buildings and made it vertical.
This sounds huge. How much power is this data center going to be consuming?
Because this data center isn't yet online, we don't have an exact specification of how much it will consume. But to give you a sense, Facebook has a goal that 100% of its operations are supported by renewable energy. Our 11-story data center, this is going to be the first data center for Facebook that has a solar project that's on its roof.
But the solar panels may not be enough to support all of the power consumed by the data center itself.
So you're right. We've also announced 150 megawatts of additional solar projects where systems will be installed on roofs all over Singapore. One of the other things is how to ensure that the servers that go into the data centers are also consume as little electricity as possible. And one thing that we focused on is really removing all of the parts of a server that aren't necessary. And so that allowed us to remove 3 kg from the server itself. And that results in fewer components that are consuming electricity, and every energy savings piece adds up.
How the colors you pick for your website can help save the Earth. And stopping pet videos from killing the planet? Nearly 5 billion people, or over half the world's population, use the internet. And that number is constantly growing. Growing.
In the time it took me to say that, roughly 2 seconds, the internet grew by 22 users.
And of all that we do online, it seems we can't get enough of
videos. All kinds of videos. Hey guys, #Science Center.
They keep us glued to our screens. And yes, pet videos can be oh so cute.
The problem is, video loves data. It consumes loads and loads of data.
Yes, video is now the single biggest contributor to data flows. In 2018, global online viewing generated CO2 equivalent to emissions from Singapore, Malaysia, and Cambodia combined. What can we do about that? I hope to find an answer at this Singapore company offering data analytics on video streaming.
Okay, Pericles, we all love video, you and me. How much exactly are we using?
It was estimated that around 80% of all internet traffic is video. In fact, 60% was watching shows online, and the rest things like video conferencing, Zoom, these kind of applications.
Makes me feel really guilty for FaceTiming my friends all the time.
I can give you some tips later on how to reduce your impact when you're watching videos.
Thank you. Thank you. I will need those. But first, let's talk about how your company is working towards making this process less data intensive.
We've been focusing a lot on making software very, very efficient so we can use fewer servers. We go back to computer science basics and try to write as simple code as we can to bring out the maximum performance of the hardware. For example, instead of using 100 servers, by writing efficient software, we can use 20.
Okay, so saving on all that heat generated and being more sustainable.
Correct.
So that's really counterintuitive because you always expect that the more complex something is, the better it is. But in this case, it's the simpler the code is, the less servers you need.
Sometimes for fun, I run old software from the 90s, but today's software doesn't feel as snappy. We also make our software more complicated and more bloated, and that's not always necessary.
So keeping it simple is really the way to go. Are there any simple tips that you can share with me on how I can reduce my carbon footprint from watching so much video?
Yes, let me show you.
Okay. Okay, Pericles, what tips do you have for me?
Well, one easy thing you can do is try to disable as much as you can autoplay in all your social media applications, such as Facebook, YouTube.
Like, this is when the video starts to automatically play when I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed?
That's true, and it also consumes a lot of energy and network.
Actually, I find it really annoying when the video just starts playing on its own, and then it's just started, and okay, stop.
I know what you mean. I need to navigate with my mouse between all the trailers, so I avoid starting one accidentally.
All right, what else do you have?
Even though it's very convenient to watch videos on your phone, you could try to use your Wi-Fi network instead, which is much more efficient. In fact, download things at your home network and then watch them later when you're outside.
So it's like you're saving money and you're saving the earth because you're not using your data.
Correct. Another way to reduce the network usage and also the energy when you play the video is to try to make sure that you're not using higher resolution than what you need. For example, try not to use 4K resolution when you're using a screen where it doesn't make any sense.
Does it make a difference to image quality?
Your home theater, for example, you may prefer the high resolution, but if you are on the mobile, it doesn't make sense to use the full resolution. You won't be able to discern much difference.
I won't be able to tell the difference. I think that's what matters, right? And what's one last tip that you have for me before I leave today?
So one last thing that I'm also trying to make myself do consistently is when you're listening to music by watching a music video. And in these cases, you don't care about the image at all. So you could just use a music streaming application instead and save the energy that is used for the video.
Yeah, actually, I'm guilty of that because when I'm exercising, I'll just leave a video on even though I'm not paying attention to it.
So, no more videos if all I want is to enjoy a simple tune.
Hi!
And that got me thinking about music. Surely music online is cleaner than, say, this, plastic.
Streaming music or vinyl? What's greener?
I'm Kyle Devine at the University of Oslo in Norway. One of the perks of working in a music department is that you get to play music all the time. For 10 years, I've been studying records, CDs, and streaming music. I've even written a book about it.
So Kyle, what's the big deal with me streaming some music now and then?
To stream one song or one album uses almost no energy and would create almost no pollution. But I'm not alone, right? The amount of energy released by billions of people streaming billions of songs and albums all the time actually could lead to an overall increase in pollution generated.
Right, so what are my options then? I should come to a cool store like this and get into vinyl and start buying vinyl?
And it's a question that I get asked relatively frequently. Is it better if we purchase vinyl records? Is it better if we purchase CDs? Between 1900 and 1950, the most common recording format was a 78 RPM disc made of something called shellac, which is made from bugs, essentially. The records themselves are therefore biodegradable. After about 1950, whether it's an LP, cassette, or a CD, they're all made of different kinds of plastic, but they're all fundamentally plastic. On the other hand, CDs and vinyl records withstand a lot of repeated listening. You typically only have to buy a record or a CD once throughout a lifetime. There's some interesting research which suggested that if you were going to listen to an album more than 27 times in your life, it was better to buy that album on a CD than it was to continuously stream it.
Right, but Kyle, I mean, as much as I'd love to save the planet, I don't really see myself like suddenly getting into records. I mean, maybe, but not yet. And for CDs, like nobody really uses CDs anymore. So like, what's the next best option? I mean, you're making me feel really guilty.
I own a modest CD collection, vinyl record collection, and I subscribe to a streaming service. It's never meant to make people feel guilty. I'm as fully implicated in this as anyone else.
Okay, I feel a little less guilty now, but you know, it's just so convenient to listen to music online, so what should I do?
There's a tendency to want easy answers to these questions, right? I think people can make their own decisions. Not just having streaming music running in the background all the time, and even direct downloading to a computer or a phone would use less energy overall than continuously streaming that music from the internet. Some people may choose that option.
Okay, thanks so much, Kyle. All right, what I'm gonna be doing now is downloading my music on my phone or my laptop, and maybe I'll even pick up a vinyl before I leave the store.
I've always thought of myself as fairly environmentally conscious. I try and walk when I can, use recyclable bags. I'm even vegetarian, so none of the CO2 guilt that comes from eating meat. But in reading up for this show and meeting different people, this whole idea of my online carbon footprint really began to sink in.
It got me thinking, I mean, what changes can I make? Of course I can reduce my music and my video consumption, but what else can I do beyond that? And that's when I chanced upon the idea of sustainable web design, and that's something my company immediately can do.
Yes, sustainable web design. I must admit, most people offering the service were overseas. But I did manage to find someone in Singapore.
Hi, Simon. How are you?
Hi, Brianna. Let's go.
So, Simon, what does sustainable web design actually mean?
Sustainable web design actually reduces energy consumption, which also in turn reduces the amount of carbon footprint in the world.
But how do you even calculate a website's carbon footprint?
There is a tool online called websitecarbon.com, which we can use. I have put a random URL into the carbon footprint calculator. The random website is about 66% dirtier than other websites, and it produces 1.44 grams of carbon dioxide every time a single user visits the website.
Got it. So what are some of the tips that we can look at to make our own websites more sustainable?
The faster a web page loads, the lesser energy it consumes. So if we are able to load a faster website, less carbon dioxide is produced.
So Simon, what's the optimal time for a website to load?
It should be within 3 seconds. If you have heavy images and video, it will actually slow down the processing time for the web page to load.
So what do you mean by heavy image? Do you have any examples you can show?
Okay, here on the left, we have this image that is minimal in design. It's easier to compress, while on the right, you can see there's a lot of vibrant color, a lot of details in the image. It's harder to compress. Therefore, take up more time to load and require much more processing power, causing a lot of carbon footprint.
Got it.
Okay, one of the tips on sustainability web design is the color theme. Dark colors actually take more processing power, so I suggest a lighter tone.
Okay, so now I understand the impact that images have, but what about video? Because you were mentioning that before too.
If you're talking about videos such as YouTube embedded videos, it actually takes up more processing power. If only a fraction of users is going to view your videos in the web page, we recommend you to actually link it back to YouTube instead.
Right. Understand. But actually, I wouldn't want people to leave from my website and go to another website to a different environment. I want to keep them there. Any options for that?
Another option is actually we use a thumbnail. When clicking on the image, then you load the YouTube video on your website. This will actually save processing power.
And I've been reading about fonts as well, having an impact on the loading time of a website. Can you tell me more about that?
We often encourage default fonts such as Arial and Verdana because it's already available in Windows and Mac. Since it's already preloaded in the computers, it requires lesser energy to process.
Right, but aren't those the two most boring fonts that are out there?
Some users like it and some don't. Yeah, but in order to save the planet, we will encourage you to use default fonts.
Okay, Simon, I'll be sure to take back all of these points to my design team. Thanks so much.
What's greener, email or instant message? Plus, how a ride-hailing app and a search engine are growing forests. Every day, we add to the world's pollution by doing this. And I'm not talking about the CO2 from the fuel burnt on my many trips.
Hi, Botanic Gardens?
The carbon footprint from data used by ride-hailing apps is something we wouldn't even think about.
But what if every time you clicked on a ride-hailing app, you could plant a tree somewhere?
That's what one Singapore startup is trying to do.
Hey, Simon! So, why do ride-hailing apps use more data than, say, a currency exchange app or any other app on my phone?
Oh, that's a very good question. So a ride-hailing app will ping its driver about every 10 seconds. That means, well, maybe you will have about 8 billion pings a day alone. That's for one ride-hailing company. And every ping is requiring a little bit of electricity. And in Asia, most of our electricity isn't very green yet. And then they're not just ride-hailing apps anymore. They're doing payments, they're doing search, they are a marketplace. They're doing all of those things. That means all of those computations need to be supported by electricity. And that means heaps and heaps of emissions.
So Simon, what exactly is your company trying to do with ride-hailing apps? How does it work?
So it can indeed be a very simple integration in the existing applications by clicking on a button to say, yes, I want to become a green rider. So if you go from, let's say, Tiong Bahru to the city center and it costs you $8, you can opt in to become a green rider. Maybe 1%, so 8 cents will be added to your bill. And that 8 cents will help us plant trees in Indonesia or in Myanmar to compensate for the negative emissions associated with your ride.
Okay, so I can basically choose to pay extra on each ride, and that will go towards neutralizing my carbon footprint.
Absolutely. We curate top quality positive impact projects. For instance, mangrove reforestation projects in Myanmar and Indonesia. Mangroves are incredible trees. They absorb between 4 to 10 times more carbon than terrestrial forests or rainforests. They create green shields that protect coastal communities against cyclones and against other negative weather effects.
So, as much as our clicks can harm the planet, they can green it as well. Another great example is Ecosia, a search engine that plants trees with every search.
Hey Ruby, how's Berlin? Hi from sunny Singapore.
I'm good. It is good in Berlin. Overall, we're doing all right.
So what Ecosia is doing is really cool. But how does a search actually equal to a tree?
Most search engines obviously keep the money, they reinvest it back into their own company, but what Ecosia does is it takes 80% or more of those profits and it reinvests it into tree planting projects around the world to fight climate change. On average, 45 searches finances one tree.
Where are some of these projects, especially in Asia?
In terms of the projects in Asia, we have really strong projects in India. Another really good example is the work that we do in Indonesia, reforesting old palm oil plantations, creating new wildlife habitats for animals like orangutans. In Indonesia, we've planted over 1.4 million trees to date. In India, we've planted another 1.2 million and counting trees. We have projects in 26 countries around the world, like Kenya, Burkina Faso, Tanzania, lots of projects in South America, including Peru and Brazil, some of the largest rainforests there.
How many users do you guys have in Asia? What about here in Singapore?
We have over 15 million users all around the world. Singapore is actually one of our strongest Asian markets. We actually have already 18,000 users, and they've done more than 7 million searches with us in 2020. And so Singaporeans are already planting with us.
Today, I'm headed to the office.
I'm excited to see my Circus Social team.
Hey guys, how are you? Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. It's been so long.
Great seeing everyone in person. And another bonus, hopefully less data used on WhatsApp and emails. Well, maybe not.
So Jillian here just asked me if I've downloaded that report over email. We're sitting right next to each other, but how often do we end up emailing each other even though we're 1 meter away?
I do that with WhatsApp, even with Ben. I talk to him on WhatsApp, even when he's right beside me.
Exactly my point, exactly.
And Marcus just sent me an email asking when is lunch.
There you go. So when is lunch?
Okay, so we are a bunch of compulsive texters and email addicts. But between email, instant messaging, or for that matter, good old-fashioned letters, once again, I really wanted to know, what's my greenest choice?
Come on upstairs.
Thanks.
Trevor Carlson is an expert in computing.
So Trevor, what's better, an email or a letter? I mean, I would imagine that an email is more green than a letter.
You're right. If we send a letter or send an email, which we often do today, the letter will use a lot more carbon.
But what if I'm sending like hundreds of emails a day, like everybody kind of is, and you're sending it to multiple people?
So this is a good question. When you are sending hundreds of emails, thousands of emails, reply all to all of your friends and coworkers, things start to add up quickly. When this happens, you're no longer as carbon friendly as you originally hoped.
Yeah, and you're kind of just sending emails without a point. Like it could just be thank you or noted or I'll be there.
Yep, that's correct.
But now what about WeChat, Facebook Messenger? What's better, email or WhatsApp?
I would say today, the carbon footprint looks very similar.
But then what about SMS? Where does that play in the whole mix?
10 years ago, we could see SMS being extremely energy efficient. But because those data centers are so efficient now, we don't necessarily see those benefits. But in general, when you add more content, movies and images to any of these transmission formats, you're going to have a larger carbon footprint.
But also, I'm guilty of attaching like huge images or PowerPoint presentations or PDFs or videos to my emails too.
Yep.
Is it better to send like a Google Drive link? Is that more green?
The good thing about that is that you're not actually sending that large attachment. So by doing that, you'll definitely save some carbon there, for sure.
Another thing I really want to ask you is, I've got these emails sitting in my inbox from the early 2000s. I haven't looked at them in years. Should I be deleting all these old emails as well?
If you and all of your friends and everyone who collects and hoards all their email were to do that, then this could really have an impact on the requirements of future data centers.
This entire journey, discovering how the internet creates a carbon footprint, has been a revelation. Our digital world is a double-edged sword.
Even while doing this show, so much was possible only because of the internet. All my research online, all those interviews with tech giants and experts from around the world. I mean, the internet is absolutely great, but we can't be oblivious to its role in climate change.
Be it harnessing the sea, wind, or sun, tech companies are doing their bit. And yes, more can and should be done. By them, by us, by me.
So besides being more conscious in how I use the internet, I may have found the perfect way to redeem myself right here.
I decided to pitch in with an initiative by Singapore's National Parks Board, which aims to plant 1 million trees by 2030.
This is hard work. But I'm trying to tell myself here, Think of the planet, Prerna. Think of the carbon footprint you've created while filming this documentary. And think of all the CO2 when people stream this documentary online. And it keeps me going. Two, 4, 6, 7. I've had a productive morning. Usually, I'd be taking pictures of this and sending it on WhatsApp, posting it on Facebook and Instagram. But today, I'm only gonna choose one of those because from now on, it's all about greening the net.
Oh, what a beautiful world, what a beautiful world this world could be. Oh, what a beautiful world this world could be.